This episode is brought to you in part by the Table Podcast from the Hendricks Center at Dallas Theological Seminary. I'm Darrell Bach, one of the hosts, and I invite you to join us as we discuss issues of God and culture, which includes anything and everything. Listen on your podcast app or at dts.edu/thetable.
This episode is part of a long series exploring how some evangelicals tied themselves to the Republican Party in the 1970s and 80s. This one can stand on its own, but when you're done, go back and start at the beginning of the season with the episode, What is Biblical? This is the Iran-Contra scandal. I've spent a great deal of this season talking about Republicans. Today, let's begin with one of the most influential Democrats of the last century, Lyndon Johnson. Johnson was responsible for the Civil Rights Acts of 1957, 1960, and 1964. Then the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Medicare, Medicaid, the Great Society. A lot of things celebrated by liberals. Well, heck, celebrated by big swaths of the country. But before all that, when he was in school at the Southwest Texas State Teachers College, his classmates immortalized him with a nickname, Bull Johnson. Or Bull, you know what, Johnson. The comedy section of the school paper featured this definition.
Bull, Greek philosophy in which Lyndon Johnson has an MB degree.
The MB meaning Master of BS, because he had a reputation as the biggest liar on campus, and it was a habit he kept up for the rest of his life. Flash forward to his time as president. LBJ had nervous breakdowns and health issues at opportune times. Such as in 1948, when he had terrible kidney stones that caused him to fall off the face of the earth at the end of his run for Senate. A legitimate issue that happened at a suspicious time. By the way, he stole that election by paying off district leaders in Texas. So in 1966, when he needed surgery on his gallbladder to remove kidney stones, as the press nipped at his heels about lies made about Vietnam, the timing seemed odd. LBJ was once again conveniently laid up. What did he do? Johnson lifted up his suit coat and undershirt and showed off his scar. Why would the President of the United States do that? Because despite the fact that his health issues were real, the press just didn't trust him. They had to see the scar. Again, for good reason. He was a real Pinocchio. In 1965, when the U.S. stepped up troops in Vietnam by 100,000 men, Johnson said the number was half that, and that the administration's policies there had not changed. I'm just going to say it, baloney. And he was easily fact-checked. By the way, JFK fibbed about American involvement in Vietnam as well. Also, a Democrat. LBJ's antics led to the popularization of a term, the credibility gap. Essentially, the difference between what the Johnson administration said and the truth. Historians sometimes point to Johnson and his problems with the facts as the beginning of American distrust of the presidency. Nixon, his successor, only upped the ante. By the early 1970s, 69% of Americans didn't believe he was being honest about Vietnam. It only got worse with Nixon's further duplicity around Watergate. Not to mention Nixon's efforts to squash peace talks between the US and the Vietnamese the week of the election so that the Democrats didn't get the win. Nixon, honestly. I bring this up for a specific reason, because today we're covering something touchy. Ronald Reagan is almost an idol to some conservatives, and for conservative Christians. In talking about his legacy, we also need to establish a little trust between us. When discussing Reagan's problems with the truth, I am not stating that only conservative Republicans lie when in the White House. Clearly, so have liberals like Johnson, and conventional Republicans like Nixon. But these are our leaders. The people who supposedly work for and report to us. We are a nation of voters, and the voters do not have to accept bull from their elected officials. Can we transition from referring to it as a credibility gap to calling it what it is? A pattern of lies. You're listening to the show that uses journalistic tools to look inside the Christian church. We press pause on the culture wars in order to explore how we got here and how we can do better. I'm Chris Staron, and this is Truce. It's hard to deny that Ronald Reagan had a way with words. He was reassuring, calm, and self-assured. The kind of guy who, just by the sound of his voice, conveys that he's got it all under control. Here's historian Rick Perlstein, author of Reaganland.
You know, people would say, how can an actor become president? And he would say, how can someone who's not an actor become president? Saul Bellow once said, if you want to govern America, you must first entertain it. And one of the ways he entertained Americans was his kind of fantastic stories. He would tell a sentimental tale about a tail gunner in World War II, who, went down with the ship. And people figured out eventually that, that was not a story that actually happened. That was something in a movie that he was in. Boundless examples of that. Boundless examples of, him just kind of making up fantastic things that, supposedly Lenin said. Or he would claim that Soviets were building, 20 million units of underground housing to get ready to do a nuclear attack on the U.S. Stuff he would either read somewhere and would never forget it. So his advisors were always being very careful about what he read, because he would, once it got into his head, he would keep on repeating it forever. The tall tales he told, always kind of came down to the same thing in the end. There are good guys and there are bad guys. We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. People who disagreed with him were somehow in league with the forces that were out to kind of destroy what ordinary Americans believed in. And he was the heroic cowboy who was going to ride to the rescue.
He projected a world that resembled what you might read in Reader's Digest. Simple solutions to complex problems. Reagan was a storyteller. Had been since his early days of broadcasting the play-by-play for baseball games on the radio, without, being able to see the game. And a lot is made of that, but it was a common practice at the time. He was confident, smooth, and seemed to believe that it was okay to lie or exaggerate if it made people feel something. Take, for example, his first inaugural address.
Standing here, one faces a magnificent vista.
He referenced the monuments before him, but then went even further.
Beyond those monuments to heroism, is the Potomac River, and on the far shore, the sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery.
You see how patriotic and stirring this is, and appropriate for the setting as the nation welcomed its new executive, recalling fallen soldiers.
Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow.
This soldier, Martin Treptow, was, according to Reagan, found with a pledge in his diary. A stirring call to sacrifice. Something you'd want to remember in an austere time like the peaceful transfer of power. The problem is, Martin Treptow wasn't buried in Arlington, and the diary was largely a myth. When his speechwriter confronted Reagan about the falsehood, he was told,
"It's too good a story. Just take care of it."
Pause there for a second, though. This is a pretty small infraction, right? A white lie to spruce up a story and make an austere moment a little more grand. But you and I should have a quick moment of honesty. What does the Bible say about lying? It's prohibited in several places, but certainly in the 10 Commandments. We like to give a pass to politicians, but whether it's Lyndon Johnson's credibility gap, Reagan's folksy stories, or the grandiosity and bluster of recent years, can we call it what it is? Lying. And lying, according to the Bible, is a sin. This kind of thing kept Reagan staffers and the news media's fact-checkers on their toes. While some remember it as folksy, others take it as a sign that Reagan either didn't know the truth or was happy to play it fast and loose. Sometimes his problem with reality showed up in heroic stories. Other times, it became a matter of international importance. Let's rewind the clock back to the 1950s. The height of fears about communism. Joe McCarthy did his thing, accusing everyone of being a Red. The country was on high alert. The Cold War was on. But it was really only cold in the Soviet Union and in the United States. Because we played out the conflict largely in the global south. When, say, the democratically elected leader of Guatemala had an idea.
What if we took land not being used by the banana companies and gave it to our poor farmers?
The banana corporation that owned the land freaked out. That's communism! It's not, but they told the US government. We unseated the leader, installed a dictator, follow me, and decades of civil war ensued. Sure, it destroyed the country, a democracy, and the economy has never recovered. Hey, but at least the Soviets didn't take control. That became the Cold War pattern around the world. We did it again, and again, follow me, and again. Like in the late 1970s when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. What did we do? We armed the resistance and assisted in a ghost war. And yeah, maybe the resistance became the Taliban, who later shot at us with weapons we gave them, and essentially enslaved women, but at least the Soviets didn't take control. Do you see a pattern? Our struggles with the Soviet Union frequently left poorer nations in shambles. What happened if we didn't intervene? When the Soviets influenced a country, we ended up with a situation like Cuba, an island not far from our shores where the Soviet Union tried to assemble nuclear weapons, thus leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis in the Kennedy administration. So no joke, it's not like allowing Soviet influence was a walk in the park either. We're talking two bad options. And when we return, we'll see two more bad options as we dive into the fascinating and bewildering world of the Iran-Contra Affair. While you listen to the ads, why not take a moment to text a friend about the show? My advertising budget is basically non-existent. Your recommendations go a long way. On the website, I've got links to collections addressing different topics. You might want to consider sending them one about pyramid schemes or the religious right. There are lots of different ways to share the show with your friends. Okay, here come the ads.
This message comes from the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Have you wanted to improve your relationship, but you're running out of ideas, time, or even interest? I'm Krista Harden, the host of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast, and I've dedicated the last 2 decades of my life and career on couples research, integrating healthy faith practices with the best of marriage research and nuanced personality typing. Couples from all over the world are finding more value-centered joy and bringing healthy desire, love, and fun back into their bond together again or for the very first time as they work strategically and intentionally on repatterning their love in healthy ways. Join us on Mondays or Wednesdays to listen and learn more about how your life and relationship can truly thrive together.
Welcome back. Today we're covering the Iran-Contra scandal. Iran-Contra is essentially the story of two conflicts, one with Nicaragua and one with Iran. First, Nicaragua. In 1979, the Carter administration backed the overthrow of a dictator in Nicaragua to the tune of $99 million. They abolished their constitution, overthrew the courts, cracked down on dissidents. American leaders worried we'd have another Cuba on our hands. In November of 1981, President Reagan became interested in a group of counter-revolutionaries there, the Contras, who were undermining the Sandinista government. Reagan famously described them as
the moral equivalent of our founding fathers and brave men and women of the French resistance.
His administration set aside $19 million to train the Contras. He justified it with a quote attributed to Vladimir Lenin, that Lenin didn't say, about communists taking over in Latin America. As a reminder, the Sandinistas were our perceived enemy. The Contras, our perceived allies. The conservative publications Reagan read pushed the overthrow of Nicaragua and the Sandinistas hard. This went on for 2 years. The Soviets backed the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. Go, Sandinistas, go! And the US supported the Contras. We should seriously name a Nintendo game after them. And Congress got nervous. It was revealed that the CIA was installing mines in the harbors of Nicaragua. If a Soviet ship or submarine were to explode, we'd have an international incident on our hands. Maybe a war, or a nuclear war. So Congress issued the Boland Amendment, a series of acts that prevented government agencies from funding the Contras. In part because the Contras, our allies, were involved in the cocaine trade, supplying gangs in the United States. So, done deal, right? End of story? We're just not going to do business with the Contras. Except Reagan's team was like, what if we funded the Contras with other money outside of government budgets? Reagan told his national security advisor, Robert McFarland, to go ahead with the operation anyway. But how? Where were they going to get that kind of dough? The cash came from a number of places, like selling Air Force tankers to the Saudis, and soliciting money from wealthy people like Joseph Coors, who also funded the Heritage Foundation, Ross Perot, Nelson Bunker Hunt, who funded the John Birch Society, and more. That's the start of the Nicaragua thing. The Reagan administration has this mission they want to fund in Central America. Rich people pony up, but they need a lot more. And an unlikely funding source came available on the other side of the world. That's the first conflict, the one in Nicaragua. Let's pivot to yet another related debacle. In 1985, a terrorist group backed by Iran took 7 American hostages in Lebanon. Carter and Reagan were both plagued by hostage situations. President Reagan wanted to get these people home, so McFarland received orders to make a deal. Simply put, the US would give weapons to Iran in exchange for hostages. But there were a few little hang-ups, like the US embargo on selling weapons to Iran. The Reagan administration went ahead anyway, but they needed a middleman, someone who knew the players and could make the deal. They found someone who was less than reputable. One historian described him as a, quote, supremely shady character, end quote. He held bogus passports and was known to the CIA, who warned he
should be regarded as an intelligence fabricator and a nuisance.
That was our guy. That was our intermediary for missile deals with Iran. He was dredged up by the NSC's Deputy Director for Political Military Affairs, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Someone we'll talk about more in a little bit. Here was the plan. We couldn't just sell or give weapons to Iran. There was that pesky embargo. So what if we used an intermediary? Like, I don't know, Israel? But wait, that makes no sense. Israel and Iran are enemies. Why would they do that? You know, it doesn't make sense to me either. But if you bought the literal ideas of the plan, the US wasn't trading weapons with Iran. We asked Israel to do it. Then we replenished their stockpiles. Technically, we weren't trading weapons. Do you see it? Yeah, it's pretty flimsy. Remember when you were a kid and some bully did that "why are you hitting yourself" thing? Where someone grabs your arm and slaps you with your own hand. Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? Technically, that is your hand hitting your face. But we all know who made it happen. That's what this deal reminds me of. We did this trade a bunch, giving weapons to Iran via Israel. So many times that it would be silly for me to lay all of them out. Instead, let's look at a small sample. Like the time the Israelis delivered 96 TOW missiles.
Here are your missiles. Would you like a receipt?
And exactly 0 hostages were given in return. The missiles had been intercepted. So a few months later, the Israelis loaded 408 TOW missiles onto a plane, where they were flown to Iran. In exchange, we got 1 hostage. Not great. Certainly not what they agreed to. Oliver North, the guy from earlier who found that shady intermediary, was eventually put in charge of even more weapons deals. These deals meant sometimes, somehow, there was money left over. Wait a second, hear me out! Congress blocked the US from funding the other conflict, the one in Nicaragua. And here, we've got some extra cash. So maybe, you guessed it, Oliver North, through some back channels, funneled the money to the Contras in Nicaragua. See that? Money from the Iranian hostage deal was pushed to feed the Contras. One conflict funded another. Hence why it's known as the Iran-Contra scandal. I'm not going to cover all the transactions, but there's a word that keeps coming to mind. Bungled. We'd give them weapons. Don't spend these all in one place. And in return, crickets. These deals did not yield results. Weapons were transferred, and hostages were, mostly, not freed. In one case, they came up with a clever-sounding plan. Put all the missiles onto a plane, but don't fly the weapons out until the hostages are released. Once we get our hostages, we'll give the weapons. Easy, right? But when McFarland was occupied elsewhere, Oliver North gave the Israelis orders to ship the missiles without reassurances of hostages being released, even getting the CIA involved, which was also illegal. In November 1985, the missiles were delivered, and not a single hostage was released because Oliver North deviated from the plan. By the time this whole scandal broke in the media, 1,500 missiles were transferred to Iran. 1,500! 3 hostages were recovered, with 3 more being taken captive. We'd given a lot of weapons without bringing all the hostages home. All the while, President Reagan insisted to the public that we would not negotiate with terrorists. We would not trade arms for hostages. To put it nicely, it was a clear credibility gap. When Oliver North learned that there was going to be an investigation, he organized one of several shredding parties, obliterating evidence, literally shredding stacks of documents. Never a good sign. Even then, the investigation turned up clear signs of illegal acts. The Reagan administration was caught red-handed. We had been trading weapons for hostages and funneling money to the Contras. The president went on television to, essentially, dodge an apology.
A few months ago, I told the American people that I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions tell me that's true, but the facts and evidence tell me it's not.
In some of Reagan's discourse with his advisors, he seems to not be able to understand what he ordered. Or it's like he's taking this at the most literal of senses. He wasn't selling arms to Iran. He was asking Israel to trade with them, so maybe he hadn't broken his promise. He essentially told America that he wasn't going to hit his brother, but used his brother's own hand to hit him. Not a lie in the literal sense, but a lie, or evidence that his mind was going. The president denied remembering a number of things. Being at key meetings, ordering what he ordered. Reagan, now 76 years old, seemed to be slipping, prompting the joke, what did he forget and when did he forget it? The Senate Select Committee found that Reagan had approved the operations and that it was a clear arms for hostages deal. The scandal hurt his popularity and left some calling for his resignation, a dark moment in the Reagan administration. Oliver North, clearly guilty, served no jail time, got a fine, and his felonies were eventually overturned. He became a talk radio host, a novelist, then president of the National Rifle Association, or NRA. He also hosted War Stories on Fox News. Despite breaking the law in multiple ways, bungling the shipments, and becoming the face of the scandal, Oliver North, strangely, emerged a hero to the right, to the point where they whitewashed his record. Despite the fact that he's best known for this scandal, this is his bio on Fox Business's website.
Assigned to the National Security Council staff in the Reagan administration, North was involved in planning the rescue
Is there something missing? Yeah, the Iran-Contra deal. They skipped the most important part of his life. Here's where it gets a little extra weird. In 1988, while North awaited trial, some of the usual suspects in the Christian right came to his aid. For example, according to the LA Times, If you sent $25 to Jerry Falwell, you could get an audio cassette of a freedom message delivered by North at Liberty University. Falwell wrote,
"In my judgment, petty partisan politics have made Ollie North, his family, and the very lives of Nicaraguan freedom fighters pawns in a liberal campaign to humiliate President Reagan."
Beverly LaHaye's Concerned Women for America drummed up support for Nicaraguan Contras through its lobbying efforts and newsletter. For a $20 contribution, they'd send you a color photo of North being sworn in at the Iran-Contra hearings. They fundraised for their group by selling photos of a clearly guilty arms dealer. That seems weird to you too, right? Why drum up all this Ollie mania? Because North was a born-again Christian. Not only that, the new religious right was running out of issues on which to fundraise. To quote Richard Vigory, the New Right's direct marketing expert,
"There haven't been many issues on which to galvanize the religious right in the past year or so. Ollie is a certified 5-star hero in a movement that is particularly short on heroes at this time."
Oh, and one teeny tiny little tidbit. Oliver North was a member of and frequent speaker at the Council for National Policy, before the scandal came to light and after. One of the side effects of Reagan's presidency is that the religious right lost a lot of steam. They got their tax cuts, the end of the ERA, access to the White House. They needed an issue that would make Americans angry enough to send in money. North gave them something to campaign on. A Christian man they saw as being unfairly treated in the media, despite the fact that he clearly broke a lot of laws and bungled his operations, with the blessing and orders from the commander-in-chief. Which brings us to the hardest part of the episode today. Putting aside what Falwell called partisan politics, can we just state here and now that Reagan and Oliver North had broken serious laws, that they defied Congress and went rogue. This wasn't just political shenanigans. It posed a constitutional crisis. Because both men and their cohorts, and there were plenty of others, broke the law and were not held accountable. Continuing the precedent that Nixon set, that the executive branch was above the law, which sounds well and good if it's your party, and you like the ends and are willing to overlook the means. But can we call it what it is at heart? Lying and criminal behavior. The Bible only lists a few sins that God hates. Lying is one of them. Actually, Proverbs 12:22 doesn't say he hates lies. It says he hates liars. So why have we, all of us, gotten so comfortable with them? Reagan seems to have had a different relationship with the truth. Democrat LBJ lied to get ahead or make himself look better, get what he wanted. Nixon lied because he thought the president should be above the law. Reagan often lied to promote an ideal, that all fallen soldiers are buried at Arlington and carry poetry in their journals, that the U.S. should stop at nothing to get its citizens out of captivity, while somehow not trading weapons for hostages, even though we did. Reagan's lies were perhaps about maintaining a mythical vision of the country, something that truly never existed. But they were still lies, and they continued the precedent set by people like Richard Nixon, that the president was above the law and would not pay for their crimes. Nixon and Reagan both ran on law and order, being tough on crime, while small-time criminals sat in jail. Both of them were not held accountable for much, much larger violations. Case in point. It's a special night for the Concerned Women for America. The ballroom in the Crystal Gateway Marriott Hotel in Arlington, Virginia is decorated perfectly. Beverly LaHaye is abuzz. This is a big night for her organization of somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 members. Their goals are to
preserve, protect, and promote traditional and Judeo-Christian values through education, legal defense, legislative programs, humanitarian aid, and related activities.
As the guest of honor approached the dais, women held up signs declaring their love for Robert Bork, President Reagan's controversial pick for Supreme Court Justice. a strict originalist who was a key player in Nixon's attempt to cover up the Watergate scandal. These women loved Bork. Their signs read, "We need Bork. Iowa loves Bork," and, echoing the Muppet Show, "Bork, Bork, Bork." Bork wasn't confirmed. In fact, his name became slang. When a presidential nominee is rejected by Congress, it's said that they are borked. Ooh, ouch. Earlier in the conference, Beverly LaHaye announced a video clip to an excited audience.
"We invited him to be with us tonight, but it was not permitted."
She was speaking, of course, about Oliver North. She'd hoped to have him address the crowds, but you know, he was under investigation for the Iran-Contra scandal. Still, she honored her fellow member of the Council for National Policy.
"In the quietness for a moment, would you silently pray for Oliver North and his family?"
The featured speaker of the night addressed both Robert Bork and Oliver North to adoring fans in the crowd. One can almost picture 1,000 women dressed in their finest conservative clothing, staring down the ballroom at their hero, Ronald Reagan, addressing a room full of people determined to create a new era of morality in the United States, as he himself was under investigation for a crime he definitely committed. This episode used a lot of sources. You can find a list of them in your show notes or on the website at trucepodcast.com. One of my favorites was Reagan, An American Journey by Bob Spitz. Another was Reagan, His Life and Legend by Max Boot. Thanks also to Rick Perlstein for his interview. His 4-part series on the GOP is phenomenal. They're readable and fascinating. The final part of the story was from a 1987 article in the Washington Post by Mary Badiata. Do you like truce? So do I. It is becoming more and more important that we pay for the things that we like. Because I don't get big advertisers, and wealthy donors likely aren't keen on helping someone who points out their problematic involvement in the far right. I'm pinching pennies to get this show made, and $10 a month from you goes a long way. Visit trucepodcast.com to help out. I would also love to have you tell your family and friends about the show. Send them a message and let them know that you love Truce. Subscribe in your podcast player so you get every new episode as it's released. Special thanks to all the people who gave me their voices for this episode, including Bob Stevenson, Jackie Hart, Dave Monroe, Josh Griffith, and Marcus Watson of the Spiritual Life and Leadership Podcast. Truce is a production of Truce Media, LLC. God willing, we'll talk again soon. I'm Chris Staron, and this is Truce.
This paid message is from the 2026 Moms, Dads, and Grads Gift Guide from Christianity Today's Creative Studio. Whether you're celebrating your mother, father, new graduate, or want to give a gift just because, you'll find a book you love. Visit momsdadsgrads.com to browse our books.
This paid message is from Shame-Free Sex Talks. Let's change the conversation. It's time to move beyond shame-heavy purity culture messages. Shame-Free Sex Talks by Dr. Kelly Edmonston offers a scripture-rooted, practical guide to raising kids who love God, understand their bodies, and see sex as good. With 25 age-based practices, it equips parents for ongoing, healthy conversations. Get your copy today at navpress.com.